my kids are accelerating far faster than they would, in traditional school, which says, okay, you have to learn this amount of information by this time, and then you graduate to the next level. This is like, okay, you have to master content before you go on to the next level. You have to know what you're talking about before you go on to the next level. If you say school, they're picturing a teacher at the front of the room, kids sitting at desks listening. And if it doesn't fit that mold, like they don't really know how to judge the quality of the program or to even say, are they learning or not? And so we're trying to produce a lot of that content to help people better understand, what does the alternative look like? Every successful kid is homeschooled. Some of them just do it part-time.
You're listening to the Life Edge Podcast, the place to learn, grow, and succeed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Life Edge Podcast. My name is Chris Staffelt. I am your host, and today I am joined by my good friend Justin Schell, and he is the founder of My School. So, Justin, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Chris.
So as we get started, I'm really interested to share your story and what it is that you're trying to do. But before we get started, Justin, can you take just a second and tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about My School?
Sure. So I am a homeschooling dad. I have 4 kids. And when I'm not homeschooling, I run an organization called My School. And My School, our goal is to essentially be Google Maps for the non-conventional education system. So pretty much we map out local educational opportunities, everything from tutoring centers that operate whenever you want to come to them, homeschool co-ops, all the way through micro schools. So that might be 5 days a week, full-time programs, pretty much anything that you could provide your child. So we're looking strictly through K through 12 education, and anything you can provide your child that's not a established large private school or a public school. That's pretty much what we have created a national directory of.
Mm-hmm. And what was the reason behind starting My School? Where did you get the idea? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so that was essentially me scratching my own itch. I was looking into homeschooling just because we lived in Baltimore City at the time. Baltimore City is really not known for the quality of our public school system, and so we're like, okay, well, maybe we could homeschool the kids. What might that look like? I don't feel qualified to teach everything. I don't know how to do that. So what local opportunities might we have to supplement the things that we would do at home? And I just started putting these on a map, like a Google My Map, and then shared it out with some people, and they were like, hey, I teach this. Can you add me onto there? Or this program's great. You should add that on there. And eventually I was like, it would be so much better if anybody could just come on, create a profile like they would on social media, and essentially, put up a flag and say, this is what I teach here, or I run a small school. This is the program we're offering. Anybody that wants to come in our community is welcome to do that. And essentially, that's what we've done is built a national network of educational opportunities, in-person, local educational opportunities.
I'm fascinated. I got 2 questions now, but I'm going to go with one, the first one, and that is, what separates a micro school from just regular school? Sure.
So that is one of those terms, and I kind of use it as a kind of an umbrella term. I actually recently started a podcast called Inside Microschools to give people a little bit more information about what that looked like, which, Chris, I appreciate you being a guest on that. So one day soon you'll see Chris's face on my more amateur podcast called Inside Microschools. But essentially a microschool is, and it can look very different, but it can be anything from like a homeschool co-op where parents are going and meeting up with other parents, and they're teaching each other's kids. They they meet maybe once a week or so, but they're regularly meeting with other kids to have a group learning experience. And so if that's 1 day a week, great. Sometimes that's 2 or 3 days a week. Sometimes that's even 5 days a week, full-time drop-off programs. Looks exactly like a regular school schedule, but there might only be 10 kids, and it's one classroom operating out of someone's house, or out of a church facility, or wherever they can find space, pretty much.
Mm. And to me, that kind of defeats the pushback that I heard a lot from parents of wanting to do homeschool. Is like, well, my kid just won't be socialized if he doesn't go to regular school. And it sounds like this offers that opportunity to then solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, homeschoolers people have been homeschooling for a very long time. And the one thing that always comes up, early on is that socialization aspect. But homeschoolers have created ways to get around that. And people are like, but I've met some pretty weird homeschoolers. And you're like, there is only a small segment of the population that chooses homeschooling. So, I mean, you have a bit of a bias in your sample size early on for that anyway. But if you want to get out and meet other families, there are ways to do that. And one of the things we're trying to do is just make that a lot easier to find more opportunities. One complaint I've heard from a lot of homeschoolers is, once they get in a homeschooling community, they have so many events going on with other homeschoolers that they don't have enough time to learn at home, and so they have to scale back. So you've got the opportunities out there. Every community is going to look different, so what those are, may be different, and it's probably not going to be a bunch of kids exactly your child's age. But I could go into a long conversation on why that's probably far more beneficial to them socially than it would be to be only with their age-based cohort of peers. So personally, I think it's a much better and more natural experience, and one that provides you with an opportunity that a lot of your local schools don't, and that is the opportunity to exit if it's not the right fit for you. And that's what a lot of people, a good portion of the homeschooling world comes from they wanted to homeschool, and they have made their life work to support that. But also a large segment comes from, some of their kids to go to school. It wasn't working for one of their kids. They were being bullied. It was not working for them academically. They hated it every day. And they said, we'll just homeschool them. And so there's lots of families that do both. And so some of their kids go to school and some of their kids homeschool. And so they have ways of filling all the gaps. And it's they've created the systems that provide them with all the opportunities. It's just much harder to find, and it's kind of less transparent. So what we're trying to do is, illuminate all of those educational opportunities and those social opportunities and things outside of the conventional system.
Mm-hmm. One thing too, initially when I thought of homeschool, and I've talked to other people who are now friends of mine who have children who are considering homeschooling, is they thought that homeschooling meant that they were going to be 24/7 now in charge of making sure that their child has to learn all these specific things, and they have to now become this expert teacher. And what it sounds like and what I'm hearing and what I'm learning, the more I dive into this, it's that, no, it's a group. It's still like a group effort, and there is outreach, and really what you're trying to do is help connect these people together so that you don't have to do it all by yourself.
Yeah, it can get lonely for parents, and it can get lonely for the kids. So absolutely, you need to find ways to meet up and make friends. And one of the things that schools do is they provide that the default is that you are connected to other kids and parents. The problem is that you are only connected to those kids and those parents within a certain area, and it's not the healthiest system in my perspective, but it does provide you with those opportunities. And so there is a growing system outside of that that says, let's provide all those opportunities, but you have to opt into it. You have to choose that. And if you want to leave, you're welcome to do that. You are free to do that anytime. And I think those opportunities and the freedom to exit anytime you want is way more beneficial than just defaulting you can be friends with these people only. So.
What do you say to people who maybe have concerns about, well, if I homeschool, my child isn't going to get as good of an education in maybe the traditional education system?
Yeah, I think, you get what you put into it. First of all, I think you have to compare it not with like a lot of people do to like what's the ideal. Like I would like them to do this. A lot of people just need to compare it to what the opportunities that they currently have are. Some people, they only have to meet the bar of like, our local school is not a safe place for my child. I can provide a safe place. Anything else above that is supplemental. But I think you can actually, if you want to, create a far better educational opportunity for a whole host of reasons. But you don't have to be an expert on everything. There's, in-person experiences that we're trying to help you curate to, find schooling alternatives if you're looking for that, but also to provide, academic options at home that maybe it's on like a self-paced course. Maybe you have like an online curriculum or, maybe even a book-based curriculum. And you can do those academic things at home, and then they can also have those other experiences out in a school-like environment elsewhere. So you can kind of curate it to provide the best of both worlds for your kids. And frankly, most of the people I talk to and the way that we do it, our kids are only doing, 1 to 2 hours of focused academic work on any day. And, the rest of the time they have a lot more free time to explore their interests, to just read, just hang out, to have fun, whatever they want, as long as they meet a certain level. And honestly, my kids are accelerating far faster than they would, in traditional school, which says, okay, you have to learn this amount of information by this time, and then you graduate to the next level. This is like, okay, you have to master content before you go on to the next level. You have to know what you're talking about before you go on to the next level. But if you do master that content, go on as fast as you want. And I mean, so my daughter who's 6, she's doing, second grade math right now, and is actually catches on very quickly and, just continues on at whatever her own pace is. We don't follow the regular school schedule. Like, we do the same thing in the summer as we do the rest of the year. It just, that's just part of our life. It's not separate school and life. It's just like we learn and we live. So.
Has that offered up a lot more flexibility, or do you think it's been more of like a burden?
I'd say it definitely offers a lot more flexibility. We don't have to adhere to a regular school schedule. So anytime we want to go and, go on a trip, or anytime there's an event going on, like, we can shift the academics and other things that we're looking at doing to fit whatever we want to do, which is also like really helpful when you're trying to go on a vacation, not at like a peak time. You're like, oh, well, we'll just go to the beach a week before everybody else gets off, and we'll take advantage of these awesome pricing. We'll have the beach all to ourselves. I mean, like, there's a lot of opportunities that it affords that we wouldn't have if we had to stick, adhere to a strict schedule provided for us. So there's definitely that. But it is, I mean, we also have to focus on what we're going to help guide our kids to learn. And all mine are young right now, so as they get older, more and more of that will be on their shoulders to self-direct. But so it's a bit more on us to be on top of all that. So there are additional responsibilities, but a lot of additional opportunities as well. So.
Do you feel that the stigma around homeschooling is being removed And what are because some of the reasons I hear parents don't want to get into homeschooling is there's a stigma around it, and then there's no resources available for it. Could you speak to those two things?
Sure. The stigma is certain people are always going to have their preconceived notions about it. And that's one of the things that we're trying to, help people understand. And a big push right now that we're looking to do is to help create help microschools and hybrid homeschools and other educational organizations to create video content that shows what their program looks like, the kind of things that the kids are doing there. Can I give people the inside look at what the alternative is? Because right now I think unless people if you say school, they're picturing a teacher at the front of the room, kids sitting at desks listening. And if it doesn't fit that mold, like they don't really know how to judge the quality of the program or to even say, are they learning or not? And so we're trying to produce a lot of that content to help people better understand, what does the alternative look like? And to help break down more of those stigmas. I think COVID actually did a good amount just to make people step back and consider education and consider alternatives. And the homeschooling world has grown significantly since then. For people that said, that got to try it as a result of COVID, they were forced into it, and then they were like, actually, this is much better for our lives and for our home lives. And the one thing, it didn't work for a lot of people too, because you do have to kind of rearrange your life a little bit to make those schedules work. If your kid's not off all day, someone's got to be around the house to make sure that, they're not home alone. And so a lot of people were just kind of thrust into it all of a sudden, and that is a terrible experience, and it has left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But, if you have the, possibility to plan for it, then it's not, not as bad. So the first one was stigma. What was the second part?
Resources.
Oh, resources. There are tons of resources, and more all the time. The availability of online curriculums has kind of exploded. It's been so commoditized. Like for $5 or $10, $15 a month, like you can get a full curriculum for the entire year. And for math, there's these a bunch of free options as well, and that's one of the things that we provide to our paying members that are My School Plus members. We kind of curate lists of like what are free resources that you can use and what are other curriculum options. But things like Khan Academy, mastery-based programs where they're like, okay, you have to master this to get on the next level. So they're really forcing the kids to focus and to learn a block of content before they move on. So there's really high quality curriculum options for a lot of things that you want to cover at home. And then for all the other things, Life Edge being a great example. If I'm not an expert in something, there's great ways that I can just say, okay, I'm looking for an expert to teach my daughter Swedish. And the internet has a whole resource of options available to help you curate your child's experience. You don't have to be the teacher. Like, you can learn alongside them. You can provide them with resources that they can delve into. YouTube is an amazing thing if they're like, I want to get into car repair. You're like, I don't know anything about car repair, but if you really want to change the rotors out on a 1994 Honda, Civic, there's a video that some guy made about it, and you can go out and do that. So, there's definitely no shortage of resources. I think the biggest problem that I had was finding those in-person resources, those in-person experiences. And so that's why I launched my school, to kind of fit that gap that I saw in the offerings.
And what's been interesting too is to see how that states have started like adapting homeschooling as being this growing movement, and some states like Arizona, you're allowed to get some of the tax dollars that would pay for your child to go to school, that are earmarked for your child to go to school. You can now use those resources to pay for your resources you need for your homeschool education?
Yeah, there's a good number of states, I think 9 or so now, and there's constantly changing that are providing some sort of what Arizona has is typically referred to as an ESA. They're called Empowerment Scholarship, but essentially they're like education spending accounts. So much like you would have an HSA, you're like, okay, I want to spend this on this educational resource. And like you said, they have a certain amount of money that's allocated per child to do that, whether they want to use that for tutoring or a full-time private school, or if they just want to go to their kids' public schools. They can use those funds in different kinds of ways. Other states have what would be more of like a voucher. Like, I don't want to go to my local public school, but there's this other school over here that I do want to go to, and I can take my voucher over to this other accredited program and go there. So there's some different structural aspects to what states are doing. Arizona's being the one that's kind of the largest expansion of that ESA model. But that's really just going to expand the opportunities that they have, and also provide probably a whole new supply now that there's money behind that demand to say, my child's really struggling in this, who can help me solve that problem? And lots of educators, talented educators, are out there trying to do just that. And now families who didn't typically allocate any money for school because their kids were going to the public school have money at their disposal that they can spend on those things. So some states are really ahead of the curve on that, and other states, I'm in the state of Maryland, will probably be much later in that game, but definitely a lot more resources coming forth, and a lot more recognition from state governments that this is a thing, it's growing, and we're going to find ways to make sure our kids are educated one way or another. So,
is there any concern for homeschooling about your kids getting into university? That's another pushback that I hear a lot is, well, how's my child going to get into university if they're homeschooled versus in the traditional school?
Yeah, I think that was definitely a concern for a lot of years. I think, and it's still a concern for parents. But I've talked to a number of school administrators and college admissions folks. I actually did an interview with a few of them a while back, saying, okay, like, homeschoolers are coming to you. Is that a plus, a minus? Like, what are you looking for? A lot of them were like, honestly, we love homeschoolers. They typically are more self-directed in their education. They're kind of used to taking that on themselves. They often have really thought about going to university because it wasn't the default track. They wanted to do this program. They looked into a bunch of alternatives. They had the time and space to kind of say, am I interested in this? Am I interested in that? And play around with different alternatives as opposed to just kind of being shuttled along a certain track and going into university. So the only difference, I think, is that because homeschooling can look like so many different things, they just need to be able to provide the college with and the college admissions counselors with enough information to give them a realistic perspective about who the kid is and what they're looking for, why it's a good fit, why they want to go to this university. So if you're keeping track of the things you're learning, any other alternative options you had. A lot of high schoolers do dual enrollment stuff, so they go into college with a certain amount of experience, maybe from like a local community college or something like that. So they have that kind of experience. They've dipped their toe into college life, and they really want to keep on going with it. And to show all those kind of things to the college admissions counselors, I haven't heard a single one say anything about like being wary about homeschoolers. I've only heard the opposite, of saying they actually kind of have the edge in certain areas, as long as we understand like who they are and what they're after. So I have no concerns about that for my kids. They have many years before that, anyway. And if at any point they want to go back to a more traditional school, like they're welcome to do that. So
It sounds like then you've left some of that decision up to them.
yeah, for sure. And my kids are fairly young, so they don't have too strong of a viewpoint about whether they go to school or not. They do see kids coming home on the school bus, and I'm like, yeah, they're just getting home right now, and their kids have been outside playing for 2 hours. They're like, oh, I never want to do that. I'm like, all right, well, just make sure you get your studies done during the day, like when I ask you to do it, and then like you don't have to, but if you ever want to, like go for it. That's about the direction we give to them right now. And if someday they want to do it, more power to them. So
That's great. This has been like the conversation's been like a giant pitch for homeschooling, but that's just because I'm so curious about it because I'm very new to it. I did grow up with friends who've homeschooled, and my confusion was always these concerns that people had because my friends still socialized very well. And there was no issues with that. They still learned. They actually learned a lot faster and moved through like traditional schooling a lot quicker than I did. I remember my one of my good friends. He was enrolling in university at 16 into the state university to get into their music program, and now he's off in Tennessee running a major. He runs a major live festival 2 or 3 times a year with hundreds of bands and stuff. And like, he did very well for himself. And I have other friends that they've gone into business and some of them have gone into the corporate life and they've done very well. And homeschooling didn't hold them back, but that was always the pushback and that stigma I was mentioning earlier, that there's, whoa, you better watch out. Your kids aren't going to be able to succeed if they homeschool. And it just, the worries and the stigma around it didn't match the results that I was seeing.
yeah, and I think that's the case largely. I think people will point to worst case scenarios, and there are some really bad cases with parents that really shouldn't probably be parents at all, and they're not providing the support to their kids, and the home life isn't great. And a couple of them have used homeschooling as an excuse, and those are the stories that make people really worried about it. But I think if anybody's worried about it, they're not one of those parents that's going to do any of that. They're not going to be on that side of the spectrum at all. And one way I like to look at it, and I've come to think of it over the years, is like, every successful kid is homeschooled. Some of them just do it part-time. So there's all these things you're learning in life. And sometimes people learn some of them at school and some of them at home. And sometimes people just learn all of them at home and out in the rest of the world. So if you look at schooling as what you do in the school building, and you look at homeschooling as what you learn everywhere outside the school building, everybody's kind of doing that too. We just have, different allocations of time that we're spending on each one. So
what was like the biggest hurdle or the biggest challenge you had to overcome through your homeschooling journey?
We will probably continue to find many, many more, where, or early in our homeschooling journey. I think, one of it is just constantly trying to figure out what our schedule is going to look like the next year. It's not, there's no default to it. And so it's like, well, what do we want it to look like, and how do we fit all the pieces together? It's so there's no exact model. It's not like a plug and play kind of thing. It's like you can plug in all the different things, you can build it any way you want, and so that flexibility, there's very far fewer bounds, and so you just have to figure out how to navigate it. And it's you're constantly changing things. So I was like fighting with my daughter to do this math curriculum for a while, and she was like, this is so boring. And then I was like, why don't we just change? Like, I don't have to wait till the end of the year to change. Like, we'll change on Monday. Like I heard people told me that this one was great. I looked into it. We'll just start that Monday. And she jumped on it and she was like, this is way better. I was like, okay, great. This program's really pretty good. Actually, I like it more than the old one, you know? So it's one of those things when you just have to understand it's a constant iteration. You don't have to wait to change things, change them whenever you want. And yeah, you can just make the most of it that you can.
Yeah, that right there. If I could get people to understand that, is that learning is not a one size fits all option. And how you learn, how I learn may be completely different. And when you can figure out the best way that it is that you can personalize your learning for yourself or for your children, that is when life, like you've unlocked a cheat code to life, because you're going to excel, you're going to learn, you're going to grow and succeed in a way that you never have before. You're going to see your children learn, grow, and succeed in a way that they never have before. And so that truly is an amazing golden nugget. So thank you for that.
Happy to help any way I can.
Well, Justin, as we start to wrap up, there's always one question I like to ask all my guests, and that is, what is one important lesson, doesn't have to be about homeschooling, what is one important lesson that you've learned in life that you want to share with all the listeners?
It'd probably be one about learning in general. I've found that admitting you don't know something is a superpower. There's so many resources out there for you to be able to fill those gaps. I remember, growing up for a long time, I went through public school, and I had this constant fear that I couldn't ask the question because I didn't want to look like an idiot. I didn't want people to make fun of me for not knowing things. And so there were all these gaps in my knowledge that, I never filled in, or I filled in much later. And I was like, man, I wish I had known that earlier. And if I had just asked the question, if I had the courage, if I had the knowledge to take a step back and say, there are far too many things in this world to know everything. It is okay to admit that you don't know things, and the only thing that's going to do is to free you from that feeling of discomfort and say, well, I can learn anything I want though. So the first step is figuring out this thing I don't know. And now with all the technology that's available, sometimes you don't even have to worry about those feelings of discomfort. You can ask an AI something and they can get you started on it. You can, go onto an online course and learn the things there. But the first thing you have to do is admit you have a problem, and then you can find the solution. And so I think that's been a great weight off my shoulders, just admitting it's okay not to know everything, and for my 4-year-old to come and teach me things when he comes home, and for me not to have known them before.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much for being with us. Where can people go to learn more about you, learn more about my school?
Yeah, well, you can always shoot me a tweet. jshell085 is my handle on Twitter. If you want to check out my school, go to myschoolatHome.io, all one word. Like I mentioned before, with the big push we're making right now to help people create this video content to better understand these alternatives, my school is going to be relaunching version 2 of the site to kind of bring all those stories forth and give you a better understanding of local educational options. So yeah, thanks a lot for having me today, Chris. And anybody who wants to reach out, I'd love to chat.
Yep, and I will make sure to put and keep those links updated down below in the description. So if they change, I'll update them when they change. And so those will always be accurate links. So if you want to connect with Justin, just check out the links down below. And if you're getting value out of this podcast, I just ask that you like and subscribe. And if you're listening on audio, leave us a rating and a review so that we can help grow this podcast and continue to get great guests on here like Justin. So Justin, thank you for being here today.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for the invite.